I would say do what's needed, not what's popular. That means oftentimes just doing the tough thing, the thing that you know is right. At the end of the day, the thing that you know in your heart is the right thing to do, but also happens to be harder and maybe less lucrative than the thing that you could be doing. I recommend people do that. And the reason that I recommend people do that is because you're more likely to be graced with happiness on that trail than you are when you're constantly chasing the thing that's cooler than the guy next to you, that makes you feel more important than the guy next to you. These are all fleeting things. The thing that makes you more money than the guy next to you. All of those things are fleeting. You got to sleep at night. You've got to be able to know that at one point we're all going to leave this world. The things that you value in life are the things that you worked for, the things that you suffered for, the things that were hard. Those are the things that you value. And so I encourage people to chase those things, not the easy way.
Most innovation doesn't come from boardrooms. It comes from being close enough to the problem to actually understand it. Today's guest has built a business by doing exactly that, solving real world agricultural problems faster than billion-dollar companies can. And in the process, he's helping shape the future of an entirely new industry. Welcome back to the Perpetual Growth Podcast, the show where we explore the strategies, insights, and stories that help you to grow your business, strengthen your relationships, and elevate your life. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. Now, before we dive in, if you're enjoying the show, make sure to follow, leave a review, and share the episode with someone who would benefit from it. Today's guest is an entrepreneur, innovator, and operator who has built a reputation for solving complex problems inside the agricultural industry. Andrew Bish is this leader behind Bish Enterprises, a company known for developing specialized agricultural equipment and practical innovations that help farmers operate more efficiently. He's also deeply involved in the future of hemp agriculture as president of the Hemp Feed Coalition, where he's helping navigate the regulatory and operational challenges of bringing hemp into the U.S. animal feed system. What makes Andrew unique is his ability to move between innovation, operations, leadership, and industry advocacy, while staying grounded in the realities farmers and businesses actually face every day. Today, we're going to talk about innovation through proximity to problems, building and scaling in niche industries, operational leadership and decision making, the future of hemp agriculture, and what it really takes to create meaningful value in business. Andrew, welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have this conversation. Now, Andrew, you spent your career building solutions in industries where the path isn't always obvious. So I always like to start here. I mean, what does growth mean to you right now in this season of your life?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it's not always as easy to measure as what we want it to be. To me, to me, growth means moving forward in any level. So if there's one part of our business that we can make better than it was yesterday, I consider that growth. I really just think life is about incremental change, and if we embrace those small changes, we start to see growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, has your perspective or how has your perspective on growth changed as your responsibilities and impact have expanded?
I would say I've learned to be a little bit more patient with the outcome of the growth cycle,
Yeah.
more so than when I was a little bit younger. When you're younger, you move fast and break things.
Yeah.
Now that I've gotten a little bit older, I still move fast and break things, but I would say that I'm a little bit more cautious before I go into it than I used to be.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. One of my mentors, and this is a quote I share almost daily, it seems, in consulting or coaching environments, is, most people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and underestimate what we can accomplish in a decade. When we're really thinking through that long term, that creating that leading into perseverance and consistency, that's where a lot of real strength and evolution comes from. Now, one thing that stood out to me is your belief that real innovation comes from being too close to the problem. Why do so many companies lose touch with the actual problems customers face?
Well, I think for most companies, they quite honestly, they get too profit focused. I
Hmm.
think oftentimes profit is the antithesis of innovation.
Hmm.
You know, people have to be profitable, right? I have to have
Sure.
enough money to be able to buy lunch today, and I got two kids, and I got to make sure that they have what they need. But
Mhm.
I think when you leave why you got into business, which is oftentimes solving a problem, and you get into the day to day of just how do we make more profit doing what we're doing, solving problems becomes a lot less interesting.
Yeah.
And that's what I see for a lot of companies is they just left their core value system, which was solving the problem of their customers.
Yeah, it's a fascinating paradigm shift. I mean, it's one of the main dichotomies of business, I would say. It's like you focus too much on your customers and the business and profitability can suffer, but you too focus too much on the financials and profitability and the customers suffer. We have to be able to maintain that harmony between both sides of, yes, we are a for-profit business and industry, but the whole reason we got into it, to your point, is solving those problems first and doing it at a very high level. How has proximity to customers shape the way that you build products today?
Well, I mean, the way that we solve problems is directly tied to proximity. We have to intimately understand what the problem is in order to provide a solution, because oftentimes people come to us with very nuanced challenges, and only when you are able to see it at their level are you able to then step back and figure out how are we going to solve this problem. So I like to be in touch with my customer. I was just thinking the other day, we're a harvest focused business.
Hmm.
And my first harvest will come up in this month, towards the end of the month. And that means I'll be in full harvest mode until December of this year. And harvest time is when I spend the time in the field and learning what I learned from our customers so that I can come back and then figure out what we're going to do to solve next year's set of problems.
Yeah, it's a fascinating paradigm shift because I mean you could take that metaphorically or literally, the seasonality of business. From a higher level, before we dive into that, because I really want to peel back the onion on that. And no pun intended, being this is an agricultural conversation, but what advantages do you believe smaller businesses have, faster moving companies versus like larger corporations?
I think we could just be more nimble. We have a
Hmm.
lot more flexibility. Oftentimes, as we get into larger companies, you start to look at those timelines and they start to get pushed out. A lot of companies aren't going to start a project. Even if they get an idea, they might be 2, 3 years out before they can really put the effort into that particular project. We could
Hmm.
actually change quite rapidly. I could increase staff, for instance, to help with a particular project, or we can work with local companies to help speed things along. So I would say it's just our ability to be nimble, and not all large companies can do that. And quite honestly, I really don't see any large companies that have much for that particular quality that they can exert with for their customer.
Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree. Like, my brother, we took very different approaches in life and business. Like I went the entrepreneurial route. My brother went the big business route. He's a project manager at Microsoft, and it's there's little to no flexibility from the things that I gather from him. I mean, he loves the environment. It's a great fit for him. It's just when I think about business, one of the things I love about small to medium-sized businesses is that opportunity to get in the weeds and actually solve problems and change the dynamics of that customer business oriented relationship and how effectively we maintain those relationship dynamics. I mean, it's not just you're buying my thing anymore. It's like, what is the impact this really has on your life? I mean, one thing I'd be curious about, can you think of or share a moment where simply listening closely to customers change the direction of a product or solution?
Well, I think it's every single product we make.
Hmm.
I think that's what actually separates us out from a lot of people is our ability to listen. I'm hyper focused on what my customer is telling me,
Hmm.
because sometimes they don't even understand what's important.
Hmm.
But as I listen to them talk, when we talk about equipment, especially in harvest, I can think of a project that we have going on right now. We're doing this really interesting project working with a commodity called wild rice, and most of that grows up in northern Minnesota. And I've gotten to listen to our customer, and it's actually multiple customers. And it's an interesting dynamic actually, because this particular customer has multiple people working in the company that all have different ideas. And so I have to listen to how they think something needs to be fixed. But then as I listen to them talk about how they're using the product, then I can really understand what needs to be done, because that's oftentimes where I catch the conflict between where we think we need to solve a problem this particular way, but we really haven't articulated what the problem is per se. And
Mm-hmm.
so we start trying to make changes that don't quite align with the solution. So I would say listening to my customer talk about the results that they're getting, and listening more closely to that versus listening to them talk about what changes they feel like need to be made, oftentimes help me they really guide me to a better solution, because that's really what they want anyway. A lot of customers think that they want me to listen to me. Sorry, a lot of customers think that they want to tell me what the solution is and they want me to listen to that. But what they really want is for me to listen to what their problem is and solve that. And those are not always the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I frequently say is, I mean, a problem is only a problem if it's perpetual and pervasive. I mean, many companies, I think, can, to take a small fire, especially in the small business world, and potentially start attempting to solve for the wrong thing. Something that was, potentially a one-off circumstance versus a repeated pattern. How do you help individuals or companies identify the real problem that they are solving for, and then come back and start reverse engineering the solution? I mean, I heard it in part with, part of what you're actually having to do is unpack the perceived problem, the real desired outcome, how it's impacting them. But what other dynamics play into those conversations? Because it's not just as simple as here's the issue, how do we fix it?
Yeah, well, I think it stems from asking a very simple question, which is, what is the problem?
Hmm.
What do we understand the problem to be? And then identifying whether or not we're talking about a root cause, or we're talking about uh, I guess, a surface level effect. And that's what I try to dig into, is understanding what we're addressing, because sometimes what we think the problem is actually the consequence of the problem itself and how it expresses itself.
Hmm.
And people oftentimes look at the expression of a problem and say, well, that's what the problem is. And what I try to analyze is whether or not that expression is the problem itself, or it's just the expression of the problem.
Hmm.
So sorting that out is critical. If we don't do that very early, we always head the wrong direction, because we're
Hmm.
always trying to solve the wrong thing. It's the fringe item, the fringe effect that we're trying to correct for. But all you're going to do is chase your tail in that situation, and you're never going to get to the root source of the problem. So I like to step back, slow it down, figure out if we agree on what the actual problem is.
Hmm. Is there a specific story, example, something along those lines where you could tie that back to this conversation from something that you've worked through recently?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have an engineering meeting every week with my team, and we go through different designs. And one of the things that I really impress upon them when they design something a particular way is I ask them a simple question, like, what is this trying to solve? So just a simple, I'll give you a very simple example from last week. We're working on a conveyor system, and one of my team members created a shield for the the belt and the pulley system. And the way that it was designed, it appeared to me like somebody could still get their hand in there, and potentially, if they did that, then they could potentially injure themselves. And so I asked the question, what is this shield designed to solve? And they said, well, we're trying to protect the belt and the shiv. And I said, okay, well, that's the problem. That's not the point of the shield. The point of the shield is to protect a human being from engaging with the belt or the ship. So now that we're looking at it that way, does this design make sense? And the answer was obviously no. So again, it's really understanding what is the problem. The problem is we have to protect somebody from being injured, and the prescription for that problem has to match. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And then we have to go back to square one.
Yeah, yeah, no, wholeheartedly. I mean, I think this applies, far beyond agriculture. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs listening are trying to figure out where to focus, right? And you've said that customers will tell you where you should spend your time. How can business owners better identify the problems that are actually worth solving?
Well, I don't want to discredit a lot of business owners, but I think a lot of business owners take a lot of time talking about how important they are when they're talking to a customer and all the things that they can do. And so I think it really is just having an appropriately engaged conversation because you want to represent yourself as somebody that's competent, and that's great. But the best way to do that is to actually solve the problem, not talk about it. So I think that when they're in these conversations, just really trying to uncover and unpack what is a customer's real problem and can they actually solve it? I mean, I sit in conversations with people where they pitch me different products all the time. And oftentimes I get done with the pitch and I really don't understand what the problem is that they think that they're trying to solve for me. But they want me to buy their product, right? My favorite example, because I work in manufacturing,
Mhm.
is ERP systems. There's a lot of different ERP systems, and every company out there wants to sell me their ERP system.
Mhm.
It is so hard to find a company that cares about where my pain points are and can prescribe a solution to that, but they can all tell me how great they are. Every single ERP system is great because of this, that, and the other thing, and I'm going to love it because of this, that, and the other reason. But again, how does it solve my problem when I have these specific, nuanced problems? What are they doing to resolve that? And when they can't answer that question, well, it's one of the reasons that we haven't moved from our current system into something better is because I've got to get an answer to those questions. And so that's what I would encourage business owners to be able to hone in on is are the answers to what they're giving to their customer, do they sound do they sound great but aren't addressing the need? Because it'd be better to have a very simple answer that addresses the need than to sound amazing and not be able to pinpoint how to solve that customer's pain.
Mhm. Now, are these proactive conversations? Are they more responsive where customers start voicing a particular concern? I mean, where should people actually be seeking this data and information from? I mean, ultimately, it is. I always one of the ways I frame things too is, I mean, not to sound trite, but it's true. It's like when we ask better questions, we get better answers. So how can we be more effective in those decision-making process or those the process of quantifying and qualitating the best questions so that we get more clarity on what needs to be solved and when it needs to be solved and whom with?
Well, you know that I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I mean, I think I try to walk into a room and have questions that relate to answers I need. But I
Hmm.
think the real secret sauce is paying attention to the dynamics of that conversation that are unscripted, because
Hmm.
that's typically where I learn the most, and it's the things that nobody intended to say.
Hmm.
The throwaway line that somebody has that actually uncovers a real problem that they have. Look, people come to me all day long for solutions that we've already made.
Hmm.
And we already have, we've got something already off the shelf that we can provide.
Hmm.
But that's not exciting to me. That helps me pay the bills. It's when I'm really listening to all the other things that they're talking about that have nothing to do with the product that help me understand if I can solve another problem. So I think oftentimes we get very focused on what do we want to talk about and what do we want to learn. And I think that there's value to that. You can't, I mean, you can't go into every conversation completely unprepared. But I think you have to be willing to tell yourself that you actually might not know what is going to be important in that conversation if you just keep an open mind while you're having that conversation and letting the conversation flow a little bit more freely. you're going to learn a lot about that customer. I think over structuring conversations is probably the death of a lot of good conversations.
Yeah, there's curiosity is a superpower. It's one thing, like so often it I think that's simply really what it comes back to is curiosity is a superpower. I mean, so many people get so focused on looking down the scope of the rifle, aiming for that specific target that they forget to take that step back and look at the greater field of play. And that's where just leaning in and actually having more of a genuine conversation where, yeah, these might have been the parameters that we were originally looking at things with, but when we really listen and express genuine curiosity, we might find opportunities to solve things that we had never even anticipated. Now, shifting gears to,
Do you
uh,
mind if I give an example of that before
yeah,
you
please,
shoot?
please. Hmm.
Yeah, one of the now my wife would say that I'm not very patient, and I think my kids would say that I'm not very patient, but I think I'm going to give an example that suggests that I may have some patience somewhere inside of my body. But back in 2019, I met a gentleman, and he came and talked to me about a subject that I had no idea what he was talking about, and I didn't understand why I cared. But the guy clearly knew what he was talking about, and he enjoyed talking to me, and he was friendly. And so I had this conversation with him, and this was at a trade show. I met this gentleman at a trade show. So the following year, the same gentleman comes up and starts talking to me about the same subject. And again, I just really didn't know what I was going to do with any of this information. And it didn't really play into anything that I needed. But again, he was friendly. He had interesting things to say. I just didn't understand what I was going to do with it. Year three, guy comes up to me, same thing. Now we've got a better relationship between each other. I've started to learn a little bit more about his subject, even though I still really don't care about what he's talking about because I can't really figure out how it fits into my life. But he's a nice guy. He's willing to talk to me about this, and he clearly is an intelligent human. Now, year three and a half, all of a sudden I have a need that comes up in my business. And the need happens to be a solution that this guy's been talking to me about for 3 years. And had I closed the door to that, had I not been willing to listen, had I not been willing to learn about a subject that I wasn't sure if it was going to matter, I wouldn't have been able to solve this problem. And so I think you sometimes do have to have patience for the subjects that you don't necessarily think have value
Yeah.
because I don't think as people we really always know the trajectory of our lives. I mean, I certainly don't. And so
Yeah.
to think about that I definitely know which are the right conversations or wrong conversations. The only way that I learn that is in hindsight. I never know it in advance. So I
Mhm.
would always encourage people to have patience, even if it's a subject that you don't think has any value to you, because there's a reason that that guy came and talked to me, and I didn't know why it was at the time. And pay attention to what is going on in the world around you. That would be my advice in that point. There's a reason people come and talk to you. There's a reason things happen, and we don't always know at the time and place that it's happening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. Uh, the main word that you stuck out to me is just keep that open mind. I mean, because what may not be relevant today could be relevant tomorrow, and that tomorrow could be many years from now. But I think that's the value of fostering genuine relationships. I think that's a beautiful gift.
Well, I
No,
think it's the secret to like school. It's I got a 12-year-old
yeah,
and I got a 17-year-old and they always ask my 17-year-old, she just went through school and really didn't have a lot of problems.
yeah,
But my 12-year-old pushes against everything. Why do I need to know this? Why do I need to know this? Why do I need to know this? And I finally had to sit this kid down and say, the reality is you probably don't need to know it. But
mm,
how the hell are you going to know what thing you did and didn't need to know later? You
yeah.
won't have known that. So the only way that you're going to know is by being willing to go through and learn these things that you don't think of have any value, and then maybe later on they will. And if you don't do that, when the opportunity arises later on, you will not be able to take advantage of it because you were unwilling to listen and learn early.
Well, yeah, and fundamentally, I mean, it comes down to a willingness to learn. it's training our brains to look for more of what's right, and you never know when content or context are going to surface, like in terms of where that perceived value is.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, shifting gears, I'm curious about your specific industry. Hemp has created a lot of excitement and a lot of confusion over the years. What's real in your mind versus hype in the hemp industry today?
Well, I do think the hemp industry and God bless the hippies, right? They really were trailblazers that helped bring the industry into a place where people were concerned about it.
Hmm.
But the reality is there might be 10,000 uses for hemp,
Hmm.
and how many of them are profitable and how many of them actually solve any problems? That's what matters. So I think we in the industry oftentimes there's the hemp plant and its actual value, and then there's this nostalgia and the mystique of the hemp plant. And I'm not interested in the nostalgia or the mystique at all. And I'm only interested in the practical reality of the hemp plant. And so what's real? The reality is there's some practical application for the plant. And when we talk about it that way, it becomes a very interesting conversation. But when we talk about it in this abstract and how it can really solve all of the problems of the world, and it can, hemp can replace everything, and you can live off of hemp, and you can build your house off of hemp, and it's like, yeah, yeah, I get it. But the reality is things complement each other. So it doesn't make sense that we're going to create a world of hemp because then we've gone off the deep end the wrong direction. So I think for me, that's what's real about hemp is there are practical applications to the plant, and we should be talking about those. But somehow we got to get away from the history of the plant because the history of the plant, the nuance of the plant, the mystique of the plant actually distracts from the practicality of the plant.
Talk more about that. I mean, what in your mind's eye are the most practical applications in today's world? I mean, whether they are actually being utilized or their future potential opportunities, maybe it's regulatory processes, whatever that are preventing the utilization. But what are the most pressing practical applications that we are either leaning into today or maybe, are just on the outer edge of actually accepting and adopting?
Well, I think from a practicality and what's in use today that makes the most amount of sense is simply building materials.
Hmm.
Building materials and animal bedding, they're extremely easy to make. They're inexpensive to make. Uh, and we need more building materials. The reality is if you can replace some of the wood product in the world with hemp, that's a good thing. If you can replace some of the cement products in the world with hemp, that's a good thing. Uh, we need to continue to utilize hemp in that particular way. For me, you mentioned my work with the Hemp Feed Coalition.
Hmm.
The reason that I am very excited about animal feed is because I believe it is literally the lowest hanging fruit on the plant. So it's a seed. And if you look at most of our commodities that we produce in the United States, what are they produced for? They're not human food consumption. I mean, humans are not eating 90% of the corn. Most of the corn goes directly into animal feed diets. The same thing about soybeans, sorghum, wheat, all these different products. They go directly into animal feed. And because of animal feed, what you do is you create volume, and volume creates other offtake opportunities. So that to me is the opportunity that's out there that's the easiest, but also is stifled by regulatory hurdles, much different than building materials, which really has no regulatory hurdles in front of it, other than maybe different ASTM approvals or things that need to be done. But there's nothing standing in its way like animal feed.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I didn't even realize that there were real world building material applications from, like you said, I think you mentioned like, potential opportunity to replace lumber or at least integrate with, and then concrete. I mean, that is fascinating to me. I had no idea there were so many different applications. Of course, clothing and things along those lines, I'm all too familiar with, but expand on that a little bit more. I mean, why are you so committed to the Hemp Feed Coalition and the regulatory side of the work? I mean, is it, I mean, I don't want to assume it seems obvious, but at the same time, explain that.
Well, I actually didn't even mean to be in this industry at all. The one of my customers brought me into it because he had a problem, and it was a harvesting problem, and that's where we come in a lot of times, and I helped solve this harvesting problem and realized there's some opportunities to help farmers. So my intro into hemp was really about farmers. I didn't even understand the benefits of CBD, and I didn't understand all the nuance behind the industry at all when I got involved with it. I just knew that we had a guy that had wrapping issues on his header, and he almost started his combine on fire, and he wanted some help solving that problem. So that was how I got into this industry. But I come from a long line of farmers. And I live in a town of 400 people. We're a very small community. And if you look around us, we have corn and sometimes soybeans. I tell people we have two seasons. We have corn and no corn and varying degrees of temperature and wind. But other than that, that's what we got. Now, what's the problem with that? The problem is twice a year I can't breathe.
Mhm.
Twice a year, I see people all around the community that are suffering from what they claim are allergies, and they're not allergies. They're suffering from chemical poisoning. That's what they're suffering with. And when you can see that explicitly in states like Iowa, where they have tremendously high nitrates in the soil and these high cancer rates. So, understanding that I'm now involved in hemp and I want to help farmers, I learn a little bit more about this plant and I realize that if we used hemp as another rotational crop, what we're going to have happen is we're going to reduce the amount of chemical application that's going to go into the corn and the soybeans. And what's that do? That helps clean up the air and it helps clean up the soil. So that's my passion is rotational crop opportunities because I want cleaner soil and I want cleaner air. And if there was another crop out there that I thought that could do it, I would absolutely be on the parade for that as well. But the reality is, there's no other crop that can really go into the same territories and work in a wheat rotation and a sorghum rotation and a corn rotation and a soybean rotation like the hemp plant. It's just simply the most versatile plant with the largest offtake opportunity of any crop out there. And so that's why I've been committed to hemp, and why I continue to do the work that we do is I want to help support the farming community. I want to help support our customers. But I'd also like to make sure that my kids are able to live in a world where they don't have to be plagued by this constant chemical poisoning.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. How does hemp play into those rotational crop opportunities? I mean, how specifically like does it actually help clean the air and the soil? I mean, can you unpack that a little bit? I'm,
Yeah,
flipping my
absolutely.
ignorance, but yeah.
Absolutely. So the when you have when you have crop diversity, what you see is you see lower pest pressure. You see lower weed pressure. And when you have lower amounts of pests and lower amounts of weeds, you spray less. So that means you're just introducing less chemicals into the soil and into the air entirely. So that automatically has an immediate effect. And then hemp happens to be what they call a phytoremediator, and it pulls heavy metals out of the soil. Hemp has a tremendous ability to pull tremendous amounts of heavy metals out of the oil or out of the soil, and soak it up into the plant itself. And so what you end up with is hemp in a rotation that with corn or soybeans, not only is the farmer using less pesticides and herbicides, but they're also cleaning up the soil very deep down into it as well. So all of those things are happening at the same time. And then what we see for the benefit to the farmer is a reduced cost of input because they're
Yeah.
spending less on those herbicides, less on those pesticides, and that's a benefit to the farmer.
So, I mean, this seems like such a simple solution. Why are we still dealing with regulatory challenges today when this has real world benefits that expand across multiple contexts? Like, I mean, to me, it looks like this is a regulator. You'd look at it and go, yeah, well, sign off. But why? Where are we running into roadblocks still?
It really has to do with the fear of marijuana. It really has to do with the fear of intoxicants and the close relationship between hemp and marijuana or cannabis. I mean, cannabis is hemp, cannabis is marijuana, but it's the intoxicating aspect of the marijuana that causes people to be suspicious of hemp. And because we have the people that are in charge right now, the people in authority, the people that are in Congress, in the regulatory seats, are oftentimes people that were taught something different than this current generation of people has been taught. And so they don't really see a difference. They don't see that hemp can be something different. They're oftentimes, and I don't want to throw everybody into the same bucket, but the reality is more people are in that bucket than aren't. They look at the plant as if the whole hemp industry is a ruse to legalize marijuana. And to be honest, there's people that are in this industry right now that are doing that, and they're lending to that opinion. So there is some credence to what the people that are working against hemp are saying. But the reality is, most of the people that are working in the hemp industry are honest people that are just trying to use the plant for some of the reasons that I've already mentioned. But it's just hard to separate in some people's minds.
Yet we have no problem growing wheat and barley and everything else that goes into alcoholic beverages and things that, I mean, agave, like, I don't know.
That's the
I,
irony. I mean, that is definitely the irony out there,
yeah.
is that we have plenty of mechanisms to create intoxicants,
Yeah.
and we're just fine with that. But when it comes to talking about the hemp plant,
Not to mention, to your point, all the pesticides and everything else that we're using as a preventative that are now rates of cancer are through the roof. I mean, these are the things that are so idiotic to me. It just feels like utterly flagrantly frustrating is just a complete understatement, but it's just idiocy is what it feels like. Like, just take that step. That's that same, metaphor I used earlier. I mean, we're so busy looking down the scope of the rifle, hyper fixated on one small component of the problem that we're missing that one small problem. And yeah, sure, it's there, which is going to be across context. Now it prevents us from being able to solve a multitude of others simultaneously. I mean,
yeah.
when does the idiocy stop? How close are we? I mean, and I don't know if that's a fair question to ask, but like, are we making progress? Are we getting any closer? Like, is it, I mean, I know obviously many states have now legalized it. Federally, I don't even know where we stand anymore. I presume it's still illegal, but like, how are you seeing things progressing?
Yeah, I think that we're incrementally progressing. The, for instance, the Farm Bill recently passed the House of Representatives. They voted in favor of the Farm Bill. A group of people that I work very closely with worked to have some language in that Farm Bill that does what calls bifurcates the hemp
Mhm.
plant. So it creates a new definition for industrial hemp and a definition for floral hemp. And where that has value is it creates two pathways to be able to have the two different conversations. Because right now, when we talk about hemp, we're talking about it in ways that may not be explicitly clear. By creating these new definitions, when we say the word industrial hemp, then it's very clear that we're talking about grain or stock material instead of floral material. And why is that a benefit? Because when you need to go to the banker, it matters. When you need to go to the insurance agent, it matters. Having those definitions absolutely are beneficial. Now, if we step back and look at it more holistically, it's actually pretty crazy because we have to take a plant and we have to separate it in two parts just so that we can have conversations with bankers and insurance agents. But that's where we are as a people. So until we can get past that point where we can accept the plant and the benefits of it, which, by the way, the that will be solved once we see this plant flourish and the economics behind it start to change. When you see people building houses, when you see people wearing shirts, when you see people using this in everyday life, then all of these problems are going to start to go away. But the reality is it hasn't touched enough people on a day-to-day basis to where we've really accepted and embraced this plant as an agricultural commodity.
Ignorance is so frustrating.
It can be. It can be.
Yeah,
And
especially.
honestly, that's part of the reason I keep doing what I'm doing because I don't think most people have the patience for it. As a matter of fact, I have watched the organizations in the hemp industry continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller because the industry burns people out. It's
Mm.
exhausting. But I'm involved in agriculture anyway. I'm not getting out of agriculture, so I just as well continue to beat this drum. It's not going to harm me any. The benefit, the upside is well worth whatever stress and pressure that I'm going to get because I don't do it for me anyway. I mean, I don't have a hemp business per se. I mean, I do make equipment for it, and that benefits my company absolutely. But the reality is, the reason that I get up in the morning and beat the drum for the hemp industry was always about people that weren't me. And those people still exist and they still need the things that the hemp industry can benefit from. So I'm going to keep doing it until I can't.
Now, did I hear you correctly in that? Did I hear you say that the lowest hanging fruit on one hand is being able to leverage the plant for animal feed and grain and bedding and things along those lines, yet at the same time, the thing that also presents the lowest regulatory pressure is the opportunity to start leveraging it in building materials. So which did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, the building materials has no regulatory hurdles in front of it. All it has to do is prove its efficacy. So I think that's fairly easy for the industry to do if it chooses to. The animal feed side actually has some FDA barriers that we have to figure out how to overcome. And so the hurdles and the effort that needs to be made on animal feed is sincerely greater than in the building industry.
Hmm. Interesting. So, I mean, is it still your feeling then that that's a lower hanging fruit leading into something that's so heavily regulated by the FDA? Wouldn't building materials be more opportunistic just in terms of starting to garner more widespread adoption and utilization?
Yeah, and I encourage people to continue to do that.
Yeah.
I, I work specifically with the University of Nebraska College of Structural Engineering, and they have over 6 patents right now for structural hemp concrete products, and they don't even use concrete.
Wow.
Um, and what's their barrier? It's just knowledge that the product exists and marketability. That's going to get solved over time as companies start to market it. And there's some companies that are marketing some of those products that they have patents for.
Hmm.
But when you look at sheer numbers of acres and volume, grain still presents the largest opportunity. And
Oh, yeah.
when we start to look at the economics even of building materials, the
Hmm.
more animals are legally able to eat hemp, which that means the more acres need to be grown, that actually reduces the cost of production for building materials and makes building materials more viable. So I think they really go hand in hand. One, can they exist without each other? Yeah. Do they do better economically when they're working together? Absolutely. And there just simply is not as many people working on the in the animal feed space as there are the building material space. And so I tend to work in that area because I think it needs the most help.
Yeah, it's so interesting though, because I mean, to your point, the majority of food products today are being consumed by the animals that we eat. So, I mean,
Correct.
that's a pretty freaking big problem to solve for. Like, I don't know. Again, I find some of these things seem so abundantly clear and simplistic in nature, and the fact that we're still having these I mean, it just gets the overall bureaucracy of the society today that can be, crippling at times. I mean, unfortunately. Yeah.
Well, and a lot of people don't realize if you don't work in agriculture, there is a system that has been created that has to be changed.
Yeah.
And the system itself inherently does not want change because the chemical companies are not looking for farmers to gain opportunities to reduce chemical usage. That's not in their profitability plan. You know, the genetics companies that are producing corn, soybean, all these other crops, which by the way, I don't think corn's bad. I don't think soybeans are inherently bad, but the reality is it's not in their profitability index to figure out how to find a rotational crop so they can sell less seed. The motivating factors for the largest companies in the world that are driving a lot of agriculture are not lending themselves to opening up a doorway for another commodity. So another commodity is a direct threat to the system itself.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, as we wrap up today's episode, Andrew, I mean, when years from now, if people remember just one principle from your work in leadership, I mean, what would you want that principle to be?
I would say do what's needed, not what's popular.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. What does that mean to you?
You know, that means oftentimes just doing the tough thing, the thing that you know is right. At the end of the day, the thing that you know in your heart is the right thing to do, but also happens to be harder and maybe less lucrative than the thing that you could be doing. I recommend people do that. And the reason that I recommend people do that is because you're more likely to be graced with happiness on that trail than you are when you're constantly chasing the thing that's cooler than the guy next to you, that makes you feel more important than the guy next to you. These are all fleeting things. The thing that makes you more money than the guy next to you. All of those things are fleeting. You got to sleep at night. You've got to be able to know that at one point we're all going to leave this world. And what do we want to be left with? And if honestly, and you know this is true, the things that you value in life are the things that you worked for, the things that you suffered for, the things that were hard. Those are the things that you value. And so I encourage people to chase those things, not the easy way.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's a beautiful way to conclude today's episode. Now, Andrew, for our listeners who want to learn more about Bish Enterprises and the work that you're doing with the Hemp Feed Coalition, or connect with you, I mean, where's the best place for everyone to find you?
Well, you can definitely find us on the internet if you go to bishenterprise.com. That's singular, not plural. You will find us. You'll see a combine there, so you'll know you're in the right spot. We've got our phone number listed. We've got our LinkedIn account, our Instagram account, all those different things. You can get a hold of us that way. If you want to learn more about our work at the Hemp Feed Coalition, check out our website, hempfeedcoalition.org. We have this really cool webinar series that we do once a month where we bring scientific officers together and present a new subject, and all of that's free. Everything that we do, we give away to people so they can learn more about the industry. Check us out there. And if you fill out a form to get a hold of me, I'll reach back to you. I promise.
Amazing. What a gift. And we'll make sure we have all of those links included in the show notes for our listeners. Now, Andrew, this was a really valuable conversation. I mean, what I appreciate most is that your perspective cuts through a lot of modern business noise. And at the end of the day, great businesses are all still built the same way by solving real problems, listening to customers, moving with conviction, and creating genuine value for people. And your work is a reminder that innovation doesn't always come from being the biggest company in the room. Sometimes it comes from being the closest to the problem. So thank you for coming to the show. And to everyone listening, if this episode gave you value, share it with someone who would benefit from hearing it. Follow the show so you never miss an episode. And remember, growth isn't just about what you achieve. It's about who you become along the way. Thanks for listening to the Perpetual Growth Podcast. Andrew, it was a pleasure.